Bujari Gumarawa, g'day. I want to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners of the land on which the City of Sydney is, the people who for tens of thousands of years have trod the paths that we now call George Street and Oxford Street and Broadway and others. I want to thank them for their stewardship of the land. It should be an example to all of us, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. So just first, before I start, I think some people think of the City of Sydney as different and easy. So I just wanted to give you a brief note on where I started this journey. Some of you have been around that long, like Noel and remember, and Stephen. So in March 1999, I sent a fax. That's how long ago it was, a fax to the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Frank Sartor, asking for bike lanes. And the reply was, absolutely not, no way. Cyclists can already use the low-speed city environment of 50 k's and share with the buses in the bus lanes, and that's all we're going to do. I was pretty unhappy with that response, and so I rang Frank Sartor's office, and I ended up having a conversation with his chief of staff, a very long conversation, and I gave him all the reasons why and what was happening around the world, and you know all the benefits. No change. He just wouldn't budge. And so at the end of the conversation, I finished with, "Look, it's going to happen sooner or later. It's just a matter of when." And that was the end of the conversation. Exactly 9 years later, in March 2008. That chief of staff had become the director of transport, and he hired me to implement the cycling strategy. So my first lesson is, even if it seems hard, persistence, patience, keep at it, and don't just think, oh, that's the City of Sydney, I couldn't do it here. So, why build facilities for micromobility? Micromobility is people riding their own bikes or shared bikes or scooters or other devices as they come about. It's people doing food deliveries, it's people doing last mile deliveries, bicycle couriers, and it's people on mobility aids. These people have to stay safe. We have an obligation to make sure that they're safe. But also why is in June 2019, the City of Sydney declared a climate emergency because we could see the impact on the residents of the City of Sydney now and in the future. As part of that, the City of Sydney is committed to zero emissions across our council area, not just in the council's operations, but for everyone, by 2035, not by 2050. So we've got a lot of work to do. Yet, although Australia's overall emissions are reducing, so gone down by about 24% since 2005, which is the benchmark. Transport, not so good. Transport emissions in Australia are up 48%. It's the high, apart from the little blip at the end, the COVID blip, which is heading back to where it was, it's the second highest source of emissions, it's the fastest growing source of emissions, and it's the one with least being done about it. EVs, electric cars, are not going to save us. We can't transition the fleet in time. There are too many other problems with electric cars as well, lithium supply just being one of them. Yet, half of Sydney's car trips are less than 5 kilometres. This is where the low-hanging fruit is. We need to make it safe and attractive enough for those trips, most of those sub-5k trips, to be made with walking and cycling and micromobility. That is our challenge. There are plenty of other reasons too, health, mental health, helping businesses, social capital and trust, all of those. But the other one that is, like climate change, urgent and a matter of life or death is safety. So again, whether it's food delivery riders and this being their workplace, or whether it's kids going to school or older people riding, we as government have an obligation to provide a safe work environment, a safe transport network. New South Wales has a goal of towards 0 fatalities and serious injuries. In the City of Sydney, since we started building our cycleway network since the beginning of 2010 when our count started, bike trips have doubled, the yellow bars. It's actually gone up a little bit more when I got the October data. I tried to get that in last night, but I was too late. So bike trips in our area have doubled. At the same time, crashes are less than half of what they were. So it's really important to provide safe network. It does work. We're leading the way. We want to see more action from other councils and from state government as well. Sorry. So this is Bourke Street, and those of you on the facilities tour this morning saw Bourke Street. What's not to love? New pedestrian crossings, plantings, trees, new lighting, rain gardens, fabulous cycleway, all the trees still there. Why can't we do more of this? Why is it so hard, right? We've heard the reasons why not. Probably all of these, right? We've all heard those. So what can we do to build the network faster? How can we manage that in this difficult environment? I'm going to propose 4 Ps to try and make it a bit memorable. So 4 Ps for how to hopefully help build the network faster. So we consulted on our new cycling strategy in 2018, and the feedback that we heard most in the submissions that were put in was you should build more and faster. Of course they would say that because it's bicycle riders making the submissions. So we also did a telephone survey, representative telephone survey, to sort of see what the general mood of the community was. Same thing, 69% of residents in a random telephone survey said that they support it the bike network being built faster. So my first P is a plan, a published plan, not a secret plan, a published plan, because what it does is it puts it out there and it gives the context for what you're doing. Because otherwise when you build, what we heard when we built Bourke Street was, why are you picking on our street? You know, we support cycleways, but it should be on someone else's street. But if you've got the thinking behind it and you've documented it and they can see, oh, right, it connects all the way from Sydney Harbour down to the airport in Botany Bay. Ah, makes sense. So a published plan will give you that context and help you build community support. Then the next thing we did was, to try and speed things up, was build a prioritised pipeline. So you need a pipeline of works ready to go, so that when you get something unexpected like a pandemic or a funding application succeeds, you've got things that you've got ready to go. So we went through and we did an assessment of every segment of our network. We looked at the need, we looked at the complexity, and we had a prioritised plan. We also looked at what we could do to speed things up in terms of design. And our cycleways, as people who saw Bourke Street this morning on the facilities tour, sorry, another plug there, beautiful design, double step, cross-section, you know, really lovely, means duplicating the drainage. It's so costly and takes so many years to build. So we've moved away, or we're trying to move away from the streetscape approach and build within the curbs, because if we can build within the existing curbs, we don't need to touch the drainage, we don't need to excavate, we can build things much faster. So we're trying to build things within the curb, and trying to look at what areas of the design process we can simplify, how we can speed up approvals. Understanding also the impacts of services at a really early stage so you can work around those risks is also important. So Bourke Street, when I first joined in March 2008, the consultation was happening. It opened in March 2011, 3 years later. On the picture you can see King Street, the new section of cycleway between Pitt and Phillip Streets, 1 year to the day from the project plan being signed off to the opening. And that's because we didn't move the curbs. We had negotiations with Transport. We had a lot of cooperation from Transport on that one. And so we were able to build it in record time. So the first two P's is a published plan and a prioritised pipeline. The next P, and this is thanks to my colleague Beth, is vision-led planning. That's the approach we take. So instead of, what could we change? How could we minimise the impacts? We start from where we want to end up. So what's the end result that we want for people, and be vision-led instead of being trapped into predict and provide. How can we, manage the existing levels of traffic? And that's very challenging. So, how do we start that process is what I'll elaborate on. So we start from Transport for New South Wales's excellent policy frameworks, movement in place, the road user space allocation policy. There's lots of policy support for reallocating road space so that we can work within the curb so we can do things more quickly. It's obviously still very challenging. The movement in place framework helps us to guide the design suitable for the context, and the hierarchy of road users that's in that road user space allocation flips on its head how people normally think about projects and gives us a bit of imprimatur to do that. So we have basically a strategic design project before it becomes a capital project, before it gets capital resources and funding allocated to it. Still, as operational funds, we do a small strategic planning job, and that has 3 stages. Developing the function, I'll go into this in more detail, but basically each of these stages we have a workshop with Transport for New South Wales. Really important, invite the strategic and the policy people from Transport for New South Wales, not just the traffic people who will always go, well, you can't do that. Workshops with them to sort of drag them along. Your great policies, everyone's still nodding, this is how it ends up being put into practice. So first, using that movement and place to look at that particular street, we work out a functional specification. So for each user group, what is the benchmark? What are we looking to achieve for each of those users? Then we look at the current and the future street configuration. We go, well, how's it performing? Got a lot of people walking here, not very much space for the people walking. We need to improve that score by adding space for people walking while we're putting in the cycleway. So that was for Castlereagh Street. This is what Castlereagh Street currently looks like. 4 lanes of parking and traffic, one-way street, pretty awful really. And a lot of people walking, not during the pandemic, but otherwise, and needing more space. So this is what it will look like. We start construction early next year. So we've left 1 traffic lane, 1 lane that's for parking in the off-peak and in the afternoon peak as a bus lane, a cycleway, nice wide one, and a lane width allocated as extra walking space. As I said, starting construction next year. This one is Pitt Street. This is a photo montage that we did in 2019, just before the pandemic hit. We were starting to use this approach to negotiate these solutions with Transport. Same configuration, went from 4 lanes to proposing just 1 traffic lane, 1 parking lane, an extra lane of walking space and a cycleway. So that's the photo montage in 2019. And then when the pandemic hit in 2020, we had a plan ready to go and we put it in as a pop-up. Really very successful, 500% increase in bike trips. Previously, over 90% of bike trips in Pitt Street were being done on the footpath. It's a one-way street, lots of food delivery riders all using the footpath. So it's much better for people walking now, and especially during the pandemic, it was great for businesses along there who could use that space for outdoor dining. And this is what it looks like now. Opened a few months ago, still got the benches to go in on that extra pedestrian area, and it's a fairly low cost, fast implementation. We didn't move the curbs. You can see where the curb extensions for Martin Place are still there. We haven't touched the curbs. We've just laid that new stone curb in the middle. Those are city streets where obviously it's more contentious and maybe not as relevant to other people's contexts. This is an example in Pyrmont, Saunders Street, where we wanted to put in a cycleway, but it's only an 11-metre road. So we had originally proposed to make the road one way in order to be able to keep the parking on both sides, because we thought the community is going to want to keep the parking. Turns out they actually didn't want a one-way street, they wanted to maintain both traffic lanes. So what we did then is we went with a yield street approach, where the traffic going in one direction will have to wait and give way to traffic coming any other direction. Someone's going to have to pull over into an empty spot. We did take a couple of parking spots away. And, you know, there was all sorts of horror. That's never going to work. Cars will crash into each other. But it's working really well. So that's one example. And the most recent, which we visited on our facilities tour, is Harley Street in Alexandria. This one's just about to open. And again, what we're trying to do is minimise the cost and minimise the amount of construction time. So one way on each side of the street, much more cost effective, because we don't need to do shared environment intersections and raise the intersections in order to make it safe at the crossings. Harley Street has an intersecting street or lane every 30 metres, so that would be really prohibitive, and it's got flooding issues. So we didn't have to move the curbs here. And again, we just made it a yield street where someone's going to have to pull over. Even better, this is just near the exit from WestConnex, and we wanted to protect the residents from rat-running traffic. Transport wouldn't let us close the road to protect the residents, so now we've just made so much friction that people won't be able to rat-run down here anyway. So the fourth P is people, two aspects to people: the community engagement and the education. So making sure that you do thorough engagement. Make sure you're reaching everyone so that you, when you get criticised, thank you, you can say, no, we did thorough consultation, we did speak to those people, we have taken their driveway into account, don't worry, it'll be okay. We address the issues that we can, okay, we can make it a two-way road again and we'll just have to have people pulling over, but then holding fast on the rest. And to hold fast with your decision makers, you might need to go and make sure that those noisy few won't get to drown out everyone else's view. You might need to do door knocking or a telephone survey or something else to show the level of support. You might want to contact Better Streets. You can find them downstairs in the exhibition area. Better Streets are setting up local groups and forming a coalition of local groups who are in favour of positive change, or other local groups in your area where you can tap into their support. And finally, it's helped us to have a multidisciplinary team with a media person, a comms person, an engagement person, and our planning all and behaviour change all in the one team, so that we've got a lot of those conversations happening early on and helping us to get good outcomes. So I mentioned telephone surveys to show that you've got the whole of community support. And every time we do this, this is one from 2018, just before, when we were doing the cycling strategy and before the pandemic, 73% of our residents support building a bike network, strongly support or support. And even people who are non-riders, 67% of non-riders support building a bike network. What councillor or politician, looking at that data would not, realise the way the wind is blowing? Other questions that we asked, 7 in 10 think the rollout should be faster, and 6 in 10, even if it makes car journeys longer in the city. So people recognise the trade-off is worth it. And since the pandemic in 2020, we surveyed people about the pop-ups. Over 70% of people supported the pop-ups. When we interviewed people who were using the pop-ups, 90% of them said they feel safer than before. The pop-ups weren't perfect, but still a big improvement. So really important to make sure that it's not those few who get to be the ones who are heard alone. The second part of P is the education and the behaviour change. So you've got some new infrastructure there, but you need to make sure it's well used and safely used, and that's because there are lots of barriers to cycling. The main one, yes, is lack of safe infrastructure, but once you have that, there might be still other barriers. Do they have access to the equipment? Do they have access to bicycles, bike share? Do they have the knowledge to use the network well? Do you need to offer cycling courses? We do. We offer free one-on-one cycling courses where the instructor will come to your door and spend 2 hours with you and show you the best route to work, or work on whatever skills you need. Or it might be just that they've seen this infrastructure but they don't know where it leads. They don't realise it takes them all the way into work or to the library or to the pool. So making sure that your behaviour change is, as much as possible, removing the other barriers so that your network is well used. So, 4 Ps for success. Plan, a published plan, a prioritised pipeline, an approach of vision-led planning, and people doing the engagement well and the education or behaviour change well. And that's it. Thank you to my colleague and comrade in arms, Beth, who developed some of this material and who I work with very closely, and also to Freya, who's here, I'm not sure if in this room, who works on the behaviour change. Both of them are at the conference and were worth catching up with as well. Thank you.
Have a drink. So we now have time for questions. Fiona, would you like to grab a handheld mic, and that way you can answer wherever you like, and we will take online questions from you out there watching online as well. And I have a question from Stuart, isn't it? Stephen, sorry, Coulter, down the back. I knew it was an S. Okay, we've got one here, one in front, and then I'll go there. Sorry. Stephen.
Okay. Hi Fiona, Stephen Coulter from Zippity. Congratulations on all the great work you're doing at the City of Sydney. I'd like to see your title changed to Micromobility Manager rather than Cycling Manager. I think that would be a vision managing backwards to now as well. My question is, you're probably aware there's been a stealth trial of privately owned e-scooters in Sydney. There's over 10,000 electric scooters have been sold to City of Sydney residents who we see riding around the city a lot and utilising the great new infrastructure. With all your tracking of cycling, are you also counting and monitoring the e-scooter usage of the new facilities?
Shouldn't need to touch it.
Okay. That hasn't been my focus because I'm pretty busy with the cycling. I do ride an electric cargo bike or trike that you can see parked out the front, and that's a really good way every day of making sure that the network is suitable for all sorts of bikes, including cargo bikes and micro freight. So, yeah, when it comes, at the moment there's nothing I can do about it. Yeah. But yeah.
I guess my point is it's already here. There's more than 10,000 being used around the City of Sydney already. There don't appear to be headlines every day around them, so the trial seems to be going pretty well.
So we don't have a trial in our area. Yes, there are private ones. So data collection is good. But what's the purpose for which you have the data? If I have data on how many people are riding e-scooters, private ones, I can't actually do anything with that. So at the moment, I'll just focus on things where I need to know so I can make decisions.
Okay. And just in front, there's a question.
Ian Redbone from Walking SA. I remember hearing you say that having two-way separated bike lanes on one side of the road is something you really want to avoid, but you have to do it sometime. You've had a lot of experience with them now. Have you changed your mind at all, or have you updated your thinking?
Yeah, so as I said, that last example on Harley Street, where that's our ideal, where we have one on each side of the road. That's the gold standard that we aim for. The bidirectional has been a really good solution for very constrained environments where we're not prepared to lose any parking or traffic space. And we want to move away from that and be braver than that and say, no, actually, we want to take some road space away from cars so that we can have a wider cycleway, or we can have a cycleway on both sides, because that's better.
Thanks very much, Fiona. George Tackers from Healthy Cities Illawarra. One of your last slides, you mentioned a bike buddy scheme where people could book a bike buddy. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and also have you done any evaluation of the effectiveness of that scheme?
Good question. So the bike buddy we renamed to one-on-one cycling courses, and that's the one where they'll spend 2 hours with you and working on whatever skills you want or the route you want. We haven't done separate evaluation. We know from the previous evaluation of our cycling courses, the group courses, that people find it incredibly empowering and useful. Empowering because they realise they can actually take the lane and it's okay, and you just communicate well with the people around you in cars and others. we know from the evaluation of that it doubles the number of people who then ride to work and ride to work regularly. We haven't done the separate one of the individual courses, but the feedback we get from people who've done it and from the instructors is that people find it, because it's so targeted exactly where they're up to and what they need to know, it's a very efficient way of getting them up to the next level.
Hi, Stephen here from Transport Planning. Just a question around the maintenance with it not being grade separated, and especially in autumn with the leaves falling and that. How does it work, and what equipment have you got?
We've got footpath-sized street sweepers that sweep the cycleways. My cleansing people tell me they're swept every morning. I'm not quite sure that happens, but, you know.
Hi, thank you, Fiona. My name is Johanna. I just moved from Germany working mobility. And what we've seen there was that the pandemic actually really helped speeding the cycling infrastructure and putting in pop-up lanes as well as here. And I was wondering, looking at your vision, what do you need most in support to proceed as fast as quickly? Is it money? Is it money to implement these cycling plans? Is it long planning procedures? Because that's something we really have trouble with in Germany. Or is it also participation, these participation processes? Where do you feel like is the biggest chance to make things move more quickly?
I think the money has been well solved by Transport for New South Wales, who have really increased the amount available for council. So, you know, if that's been a barrier for people in the past, they should just go for it now. Approval processes, particularly approvals from Transport for New South Wales. To get approval to change a traffic signal takes between 1.5 years and 7 years. And, you know, we sort of need to do that at the beginning before we know if we can do it. So approval processes, and there's only so I meant to say in my presentation that in the first 10 years, we built 15 kilometres of separated cycleway. It's not very good. 1.5 kilometres a year is not very good. In 2020, we built almost 10 kilometres of separated cycleway, pop-up and permanent. That's what we want to try and maintain, that sort of level. So in July, we opened 5 new separated cycleway projects in the city centre and in Alexandria mostly. In September, we opened a Pitt Street permanent. In the next 2 months, we'll open College Street cycleway, Ashmore and Harley Street cycleways, and Bridge Railway and Henderson cycleway. So you can see this, and then we'll start construction early next year or by mid next year on Castlereagh and Liverpool and Oxford.
Question from the floor. Will the College Street cycleway have any special ribbon cutting ceremonies?
It should definitely. So anyone with any particular suggestions, lots of people have suggested naming it as a...
Or asking him to come and cut the ribbon. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe. I'll take any suggestions on notice.
I think there was a question. Okay, we've got 3 questions. 4. 1. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we've got 2 minutes. Go for it. Nice, quick questions, quick answers.
I've got the talking stick. Anne Napier from Transport Canberra and City Services. The yield streets, by the sounds of things, that seems to be one of the popular compromises. Is that what I'm hearing today? That and how much parking do you tend to lose if you've got parking on both sides?
Yeah.
What sort of issues come up?
It's going to depend completely on the street. Yes, it's our preferred. You know, it's been very useful for these last couple of streets. Harley Street, we didn't need to lose any parking because with an intersection every 30 metres, there's no stopping zones that covers it. On Saunders, the traffic volumes are they're really low. So we took maybe 5 or 7 parking spaces out of the total of maybe, 40 to make it work.
Okay, next question.
Oh, Rebecca Dunn from Adelaide. With the 500% increase over the pandemic of cyclists, do you have any gender splits? Was it a 50-50 split with that increase? Or
So on Pitt Street, the majority of them were food delivery riders, and so it was a fairly small proportion of women.
Next question. You've got one behind you, and there's another one. Oh, and the gentleman in the jacket in front. Yep.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. We rode some of your cycleways yesterday and fabulous to see the progress. Belinda Ward from Space for Cycling Brisbane. A question, if you don't move the curb, you do effectively put the cycle lane in the gutter. And I guess my question is, how do you go during rain events?
Yeah, so again, it's going to depend on the street and whether that has flooding issues, what the camber is on the road, and whether it's on a hill or flat. We do need to make some of the projects. We have to improve the stormwater. So Harley Street, there are stormwater improvements that need to be made. So it depends on the individual site, and we also, because of the gutter, either need to resurface all the way to the curb to make sure that there's not a lip that generates over time between the concrete and the asphalt. Or we put in a smaller curb, which is what we've done on Saunders, a curb with a smaller gutter, but then you need to redo the curb. So
We've got two questions. We're actually out of time, but we're going to try and get through two questions. One here, and then there was one, that person with the mask on. Okay.
Hi, thanks for that great presentation. Michael Schwartz with Ride Report. I also have been very impressed with a lot of the facilities we've been riding on. We've been hearing a lot over here about this idea of business cases that need to be made in order to approve certain projects. Can you talk just a little bit about how you make that case, where the data comes in from, and if there's ongoing sex? You don't need to make business cases.
we've got a cycling strategy which Council has adopted, which says these are the routes on which we're planning to put cycleways. More recently, we've had to do a bit of an internal process that's called a business case, but basically it's Council's adopted policy. And really, Transport for New South Wales themselves, when they do projects, need business cases. Why bother? The benefit-cost ratio for walking and cycling projects is way better than any road.
Thank you. And the last question over here.
Penelope Bennett, City of Adelaide. As people from Adelaide will know, we're struggling to even get a single north-south and an east-west cycle route. So tips for success of communicating the importance of a dense network.
Yeah, I empathise with you in Adelaide. I don't know, because you guys have tried so hard and you've got good advocates. I don't know, infiltrate the councillors, I don't know, or businesses.
And we definitely don't have time for this conversation now. That's a big one. Would you give Fiona a round of applause, please? Thank you. Oh, can you put it on there to take people answers?